Solosaurus, a podcast about one-player board and card games. My name is Brandon Waite.
And my name is Carter Mackey.
And this is episode 65, where we are going to review a game that is basically Final Fantasy Tactics, the board game, Tiny Epic Tactics. So we will get to that in just a few minutes like we always do, but we are going to start with the news. And the news comes to us this week and every week from tablefor1.me. If you haven't been to tablefor1.me, it's a great website where you can learn all about solo games news and see some reviews and that sort of thing. Great site for anybody who's interested in this. That is tablefor1.me. And our first bit of news this week is that there's going to be a new expansion for Teotihuacan, or Teotihuacan. It's called The Expansion Period.
Oh.
I love and hate that name so much. It's better than the late pre-classic period.
Yeah, that's not a good one either.
It's not a good one either. But this is going to add a new wild resource, Obsidian, which is pretty cool. I don't fully understand what they mean by this, but basically the space between action spaces on the board is now going to contain some kind of action that you can do that's going to move clockwise around the board during the game. That sounds really interesting to me. Interested to learn more about that. It's going to involve military conquest of some kind, an expansion in that way, and it's going to have an upgraded bot that's going to allow you to play all of this stuff solo, which is really impressive because they've added a lot of new content at this point, and they are consistently making sure it all plays solo.
Yeah, it really is impressive.
That's really neat. So this is going to be, they say, the final expansion for this game, which, 3 expansions, I think, at this point. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So if you like this game, this is coming out in March 2021. So check that out. That is Teotihuacan, the expansion period from Board and Dice Games. The second bit of news this week is that Stonemaier Games has announced the first expansion for Tapestry Plans and Ploys. That is going to be available for a September pre-order, and based on what I can tell online, it looks like it's going to add a few new civilizations. One of those civilizations is going to have the landmarks that you put on your capital city board actually do something instead of just being really big, expensive polyomino pieces.
Oh, okay.
But they also add new landmarks to the game, which I don't really feel like it needed, to be honest. I feel like it's just going to be a pain in the ass to store.
Yeah.
It's not going to fit inside my box.
Yeah.
Other than that, it looks like there's going to be other new mechanics that haven't been revealed yet by Stonemaier, and it looks like a pretty good sized box. So I'm personally interested to see more about this game. I like Tapestry quite a bit. It's not one that we've reviewed on the show, but it has some problems with balance and things that would be a problem for me in multiplayer. But in solo, that just makes it interesting.
Right.
Yeah, if you like Tapestry, this is going to come out probably later this year, like October, November, but you can pre-order it in September. So check that out. And you can learn more about this on the Tapestry Board Game Facebook group if you're interested in that. Our third bit of news this week, and by far the biggest piece of news this week, is that Chip Theory Games has announced their next brand new IP game, and it is called Burn Cycle. Burn Cycle is going to be a Metal Gear Solid style kind of stealth action game.
Okay. And
you've seen their other games, right? Like Hopalmachus
right.
and Too Many Bones. So they said that their other games have been very combat focused. Cloud Spire is also very combat focused. This is going to be stealth focused. So you are basically playing robots in the far future. Robots were created, and the humans who created them were very oppressive. And so the robots rose up against them and all but eliminated humans.
Okay.
And then after many years, they decided that maybe humans could be trusted if they were to bring them back. So they brought them back and found out, like all of us know, that we 100% cannot be trusted. And they were enslaved again.
Oh, good.
So this is a cooperative game, which they've not done. That's not true. They did Triplock, which I think could be played cooperatively. Yeah. And maybe Cloud Spire could be played cooperatively as well.
I have no idea.
This is a cooperative game.
Okay.
And they're going to have this neoprene mat that shows like an office building. And they're going to have other pieces of furniture and whatnot that are printed on neoprene that you put on top of it to create a floor. And you need to go through different levels in this building and ultimately try to get to the boss of a particular corporation. whose offices you're going through, and unplug the boss from the system. So, yeah, as you're going through the building, the enemies have you have the ability to hack into terminals to see where enemies are moving, and you have the ability to fight. And I don't know, it just seems really clever.
Yeah.
And different. And the artwork for it is rad. It's got a really cool look to it. I love everything about the look of this game. So yeah, I like the idea of also being able to play in both the physical space and the digital space, and as well, like kind of messing with the corporation systems. That all sounds super cool. This is coming to Kickstarter in November of this year, and you can bet it's going to be huge, a massive Kickstarter. So start saving your money now if you're interested. They did say that this is not quite as light as Hoplomachus, which can be pretty light in terms of its basic mechanics, but not nearly as complex as like Too Many Bones or Cloudspire also. Okay. So it's kind of a medium weight game, which I'm way more likely to play.
Yep, absolutely.
So definitely check that out. That's Burn Cycle from Chip Theory Games. And that's all the news we've got for this week. So we are going to get into the review, which is sponsored by Stone Valley Games. Man, Stone Valley Games. I just got a package from them earlier today where I had pre-ordered the Hulk Hero expansion for Marvel Champions.
Oh, wow. A Marvel Champions purchase by Brandon.
It's really good. Yeah, it's really good. It came again with a handwritten letter. Came packaged perfectly in bubble wrap. Actually, you could have probably thrown this thing off a bridge and it would have been fine. And so, yeah, it's not necessary, but I love it. I love it so much. They're really good to us and to the show, and we are very thankful for their sponsorship. But honestly, even if they didn't sponsor the show at this point, I would still be singing their praises every chance I get. They're a really great company. Eric has done a great thing at Stone Valley by creating a shop that is oriented towards solo gamers, but also contains a bunch of other stuff. You know, they're getting in new games all the time. They carry a lot of RPG supplies. And they ship for free to U.S. military who are deployed overseas. So if you are interested in that, or just need to try some kind of a new game store situation online, give it a shot. Don't give your money to Amazon. Don't spend too much on eBay. Just go to stonevalleygames.com. All right. This review is for Tiny Epic Tactics, which was sent to us by Stone Valley Games, by the way. This is designed by Scott Alms and published by Gamelin Games and was released in 2019 and plays 1 to 4 players. In Tiny Epic Tactics, you take control of a squad of fantasy heroes who are battling across 3D terrain for victory. Each turn, players are going to take turns moving and attacking with their heroes, trying to take out opponents and capture objectives while keeping their heroes alive. And the player or bot that best navigates the terrain and utilizes their squad special abilities will be the winner. So that is the gist of Tiny Epic Tactics. Let's start by talking about the thing that is most obviously cool about this game, the components.
Right. I mean, what do you want to start with? The box or the actual pieces?
Oof. Let's talk about the box for a minute.
Okay. So, I mean, like a lot of tactic games, if you're familiar, there's different elevations in the game or in the map that you're playing on. And the way they've done it with using like little boxes that they have inside the box, and even the bottom part of the box is a part of the game board. You have this just interesting stacked terrain battlefield that you're using. And it's just so cool how it all works. And for the solo play, and maybe cooperative too, I'm not sure, on the underside of the boxes, there are little dungeons, which is a super cool way just to use every single side of the boxes.
Yeah, it's really neat. They use every single component to its max efficiency, I feel like. I mean, Gamelin Games is kind of a one-note company in a lot of ways. They are mostly Tiny Epic Games makers. They've done, I think, one other game which was massive. They did Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, which is massive, like real-time strategy style game. But otherwise, everything that they do fits in these tiny boxes, and they've just become masters of using the small amount of space that they have at their disposal to create some pretty amazing table presence. When you look at this game on the table, it looks better than a lot of the other games that I have on my shelf that come in much bigger boxes.
Absolutely.
The box nesting thing is amazing. This looks like it was ripped straight from Final Fantasy Tactics and put on my table. The look of it is just, if you ever played Final Fantasy Tactics and it gives you the warm fuzzies, or Advance Wars or Fire Emblem, any of those games, I think you're going to feel right at home here. But the 3D element is definitely a Final Fantasy Tactics thing. Mm-hmm. So it's very clear that they were influenced by that and wear that influence on their sleeves. But that's okay, because I can't really think of another game out there that goes for that side of the like tactical battle game element. No other game out there tries to capture that feeling. So component-wise, they nailed it. And the board, that kind of the main ground that all these other hills and things are placed on, is a piece of cloth. What?
Yeah.
That's so awesome.
And it works so well.
I think I love cloth boards in games, or like fabric boards.
Mm-hmm.
It works super well here. It looks great on the table. And like you said, like being able to flip over these boxes to have dungeons on the other side, amazing.
Such a cool idea.
Great idea. And then the other pieces are great. Hey, my apologies if you're hearing people cry in the background, because I have small children. Mm-hmm. We're just going to forge ahead. The rest of the pieces look great. They are really beautifully cut little wooden bits that represent like the warriors and like your different heroes. They're screen printed on the actual wood pieces themselves. And then like your little trackers to track your ranged ammo and your mana and stuff. They're awesome.
Yeah. They're just neat little cutout like hearts or potion bottles or little quivers in there. Like they have cutout parts in the middle, so they have like kind of a hole. I don't know. It's just really well done. It has a really like unique look. I've never really seen other components that use a tracker like this.
Yeah, I think it's so clever, because I feel dumb saying, oh, the hole cut out of the middle of the wood piece is a really cool feature.
Yeah.
But it is, though, because you can see the numbers underneath it. Like you've got a heart to track your health, but you can see the number through it. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Really love that. And like the graphic design on the cards, you've got the trackers for your mana or your ranged ammo or your health just going around the outside edge of the card, which is a super efficient, cool way to track all of that. Mm-hmm. Like the whole game just feels nice and compact, and I really love the presentation of this. Component-wise, just top notch. And then as far as like the rules are concerned, I thought the rules were pretty easy to learn, at least for the core game. The solo rules, I think, get a little more convoluted.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's more rules there than I kind of would have expected before I really opened it up, but the solo rules adds a little bit more complexity.
I do think that one of the things that makes this nice for me rules-wise is that so much of what I need to know is on the card in text form. That makes it harder for our international friends to be able to get a copy of this in their own language. But it also makes it a lot easier to play when you're not just relying totally on symbols. So I thought, because the graphic design is pretty solid, and because there's text on the cards, I feel like a lot of this was really easy to keep track of, at least the core systems anyway. The solo rules and the variants, I found a little messy, to be honest. There's a lot of this rulebook that's devoted to just variants that I'm not interested in playing ever. Mm-hmm. And then the solo rules add a considerable amount of rules.
Yeah, it's a good several more pages of kind of variations on the rules and how to kind of do things slightly differently.
Yeah, and I mean, in the grand scheme of things, compared to other games, not that many rules, right? Because this is still a very small game with a pretty small rule book as well. But I don't know, I just found that part to be a little bit messy, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the solo play for this game. But overall, I thought the rules were okay. I will say one thing I want to kind of brag on Gamelin Games about is when I first got this game from Stone Valley in the mail, I sat down outside. It was a beautiful day, poured myself a beer, and I was like, I'm just going to sit down and relax and read this rule book. I got about midway through, and my rule book went from page 12 to page 16. And like nothing, it was just missing pages in the middle. Like somehow they just hadn't included that middle section of the rulebook, which is very frustrating. And of course, I mean, I could find the PDF online, but I just reached out to them and said, hey, I'm missing these pages in the rulebook. And no questions asked, they sent me something. It was in the mail just a couple of days later. So good on them for having such excellent customer service. But otherwise, the rules for me were fine. And the play of the game then is, at its core, really simple. So in the multiplayer game, which is I think kind of the primary way to play this game, it's definitely designed with that in mind first. What you're going to do is each player is going to get a squad of 4 adventurers. You're going to get a fighter, a beast, a rogue, and a mage or a wizard. I can't remember what they call it, but you're going to get that core group of people, and all of these different characters are wildly different because you don't just have one type of rogue in the box. You've got like 4 or 5. There are several different options for each one of these roles. So you're going to deal out a team of 4 of these people to each person who's playing the game, and then you're going to use your heroes over the course of the game to capture objectives on the board and try to hold those to get points, or you're going to get points for capturing other players' hero, killing them, right? So on your turn, you're going to move and you can attack, or you can take some special action that's on your hero's card or on one of your tactic cards, which are little special cards that you can play during the game to give you kind of a special boost. And so that's really the whole core of the game. Very simple: move, attack, try to capture objectives, and use your special abilities. But what makes this game interesting is on your turn, you get to take 3 actions, but you only have 4 heroes, which is a really interesting quandary, I think. And that's probably one of my favorite things about this game is you have to decide, like, who am I going to activate? You're not going to be able to activate everybody every turn. And then in addition to that, the other wrinkle is you actually can't do more than one action with each hero unless you want to become weakened. So there's kind of a penalty for taking 2 actions in the same turn. So if you want to move and attack, you can do that, but then you get a little weakened token on your character, which means if you act the next turn, you're going to lose HP for acting because, you know, it's a lot to ask of a hero to both move and attack in the same turn. So yeah, thematically that doesn't make much sense. But, you know, I think that provides an interesting little tactical wrinkle. And so that is really kind of the core of the game. Move around on this grid, attack people, very much like kind of Advance Wars or Final Fantasy Tactics style. And then also like those kind of games, the terrain makes a very big difference. So if you are in a forest and you're being attacked, you have some cover and you'll take 1 less damage, which is significant because you don't have that much HP in this game. Or, you know, if you're moving across water, you lose a movement point when you're coming out of water. Or when you are going up on a mountain, it takes an extra movement point to climb up. But once you're up there, your range for your attacks is a little bit further, which makes sense, right? You're climbing up higher, you can shoot a little further. I really like all of that good stuff. But overall, it's pretty simple. Even the terrain effects are pretty simple, although they do add a neat little wrinkle to the game. As far as like moving and attacking is concerned, movement is mostly hindered by your terrain that you're moving across. Attacking is interesting because it's deterministic. You can see your fighter has, or each one of your adventurers, I guess I should say, since fighter's an actual class, has an attack value printed on their card. When you attack somebody, you just do that much damage to them. Easy peasy, right? And so it's deterministic combat, which is good because it makes the game a little more puzzly, a little more tactical, like the name of the game suggests. But you do have a wrinkle in that when you're fighting somebody, you can roll some extra dice or do something extra powerful. So, for instance, if you are hitting somebody with a sword, you might be able to knock them back. So you'll roll a die to see if you're able to knock them back and how many spaces. Or if you're firing an arrow, some of your arrows may break, and you've got a little ammunition tracker around the border of your card. And when all of your ammunition's gone, it's just gone, which is kind of crazy. Or with mage special abilities, you may be able to spend some of your magic, which is another track of resources that you control that you can then use to boost your attacks or roll more dice for special effects and that sort of thing. Really, really cool, kind of very simple, basic stuff. It's still pretty basic as far as the moving and the, attacking and all that. But there's some really interesting stuff there in the core of the game. But that being said, a lot of what's in the core game doesn't really apply to the solo game. So the moving and attacking and all that, that's the same, but you're not really capturing objectives in the same way. You are instead trying to use these holes that are printed onto the side of some of these terrain pieces, which are, in the multiplayer game, use them as portals. I guess I shouldn't say just in the multiplayer game. In the multiplayer and the solo game, you can use these cave-like entrances that are printed on some of the terrain boxes as portals, meaning that you walk in one of them and you can walk out on another one elsewhere on the board. So you can kind of move quickly around the map. But in the solo game, they're very crucial because the point of the solo game is not to get more points than the other players. The point of the solo game is to go into dungeons and find these different crystals inside the dungeons, 6 crystals, and you need to capture them, get a one-time benefit for using them, which is neat because that does affect like what order you try to go after them in. And then you want to capture all 6 before the time tracker runs out if you want to win the game. And the way that the dungeons work is that you're actually going to flip those boxes, those terrain boxes that you see on the board. And like if you walk in that little cave entrance that could also be a portal, you flip over that box, and then printed on the inside of the box is a dungeon layout. And you're going to have to go through that and progress through some different traps and things if you want to be able to get the jewel that's in there so that you can win. And this is kind of a mixed bag for me, to put it mildly. If you don't have that many turns, you're trying to get inside these dungeons, having to spend like 3 turns to move and attack to get somebody off the top of one of these boxes so you can go inside is the worst.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating and I hate it.
Yeah, it takes a long time to do that.
Again, practically, I totally understand why you have to do that, right? Can't be flipping these boxes over with player pieces and then trying to come up with, where those pieces are going to go. That's a very difficult thing to manage rules-wise. But gosh, it's frustrating. So I found myself, especially at the end of the game, you have to go through these 6 dungeons, and the boxes that are on the board are different sizes. And the biggest one is the one you have to go in last, which makes sense, except that because it's the biggest surface area on the board, you're going to have the hardest time getting people off of there. What's really frustrating is I would go climb up this mountain to go knock someone off, and then my guys are in my way now. So I have to take another turn just to get them out of the way so I can go in the dungeon. I didn't really like that practically very much at all. And then once you get inside the dungeons, they're not interesting.
I really was excited whenever I saw this kind of reversible box thing. I thought it was super cool. But then when I actually learned the rules for them, I was somewhat disappointed in that there's not really any interesting choices. You kind of just make the best straight line you can, and you draw some cards and roll some dice, and that's it.
Yeah, it's really just not nearly as much fun as I had hoped it would be. Once you get inside there, there's you can step on squares that might be a trap or might have a monster come up or something. But that's just a matter of just either taking some damage or paying out a resource, or if you happen to be the right character type who goes inside this mountain, like a mage or whatever, you might be the only one who can safely pass over this space to avoid some of these traps. But there's no way for you to know going in who you should send into the dungeon.
Right.
Unless you just played before and you remember, which is frustrating. So, yeah, that part didn't really do anything for me. The only part of that dungeon thing that I found interesting is enemies from on the board can't follow you in, which is good because you don't have to deal with all that. But also, once you get the crystal that's inside there, you immediately activate its one-time special ability. And so timing which dungeons you go into when can be pretty helpful.
Right.
Because sometimes, a special ability of one of them will really be a benefit to you at this point in the game, but not so much at this other time. The jewel thing was pretty interesting and the timing of it. But otherwise, the dungeon part, it just took too long and felt really drug out for something that was not really that fun to play moment to moment. And unfortunately, that's kind of the key to the solo game.
That's what you're trying to do. Fighting the other team of opponents is you're just trying to do that as little as possible so you can do the dungeon thing as fast as possible.
Yes, exactly. And for me, that strips out what I think would be the most fun part of playing this game.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that part didn't do much for me. And the other thing that didn't do quite as much for me is the AI management. So you basically have a deck of cards after your turn is done and you've taken your 3 actions. You've got a deck of cards that you can flip up to see which hero or like enemy hero, I guess, is going to take their action next. Now, one thing I do like about this is there's pretty clear instructions on the card for which character you need to activate. They only activate 1 on their turn, which is really nice. And they don't activate the same one multiple times. They're going to go through all 4 of their heroes, which is kind of nice because then it allows you to prepare a little bit and choose to leave somebody alone for a few rounds and do something else. So I liked that. But the way that the AI works is they also, whenever they activate, they'll also get a special kind of bonus for that round. And sometimes those bonuses are brutal.
Yeah, they make it feel swingy enough to where it's like, it's hard to account or plan exactly what's going to happen. And maybe it wouldn't if, played like 10 or 15 games of this or something like that. But yeah, I mean, it made it, oh, well, now this character is dead because it was able to do 2 extra damage. And I wasn't really expecting that.
Yeah, I didn't really like that at all. It felt to me like they were trying to make up for the fact that this is a tactical game, that they can't replicate an AI opponent very well for it. So we'll just up the difficulty in some kind of random ways as a way of balancing out, your ability to win. And to their credit, it's very difficult to win. I believe it can be done, but I found it very challenging. And I often got pretty close to the end. And before I was like, I just found out I'm not going to be able to win this time. So kudos to them. They have made a challenging game, and that's not nothing for something that plays solo. But I just don't like the kind of challenge it is here. It just doesn't feel fair.
Yeah, it doesn't feel fair. It's not fun. And it's just, it doesn't feel good also to like give up. Because that's what I did every time. It was like, well, it's game over now, so I'm just going to stop playing. It wasn't like, let's see how well I did, or I just didn't do as good as I wanted to, or I tallied up and compared my score to the AI or whatever. It was just, well, I'm not going to finish because I've lost.
Well, and that's true, and I think it's worth it to quit like that when you feel like you're going to lose, because the game's pretty long solo. Like my games, when I made it close to the end, were almost an hour.
I would say that's about what I was playing. Maybe a little more. I don't know. I lose track of time.
To me, that feels like it's outstaying its welcome at that point.
Yeah.
I would have liked a 30 to 45 minute game, I think, but an hour felt a little bit too much to me. And so, yeah, at least I'm incentivized to go ahead and stop playing if I feel like I'm not going to win, which is not great and not a good feeling. And yeah, so the AI just didn't do too much for me. The main goal of the solo mode didn't do a lot for me either. Now, one thing I did like is the time tracker mechanism. So in the multiplayer game, you're rewarded victory point wise for killing your enemies and capturing them. In this, as soon as you kill one of them, they're going to spawn back onto the board, which feels very grindy and bad.
I hate that. I really, really hate that feeling.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like you're doing the same thing throughout the game. You're not really making progress.
Yeah, you're not making progress. You're just trying to race the clock, and just getting a new enemy fresh. That's not an option for you. It's not like if your guy gets knocked out, you get to respawn or something like that out of position. It's just like, no, you're down a person.
But see, what I like about that is that every turn that you take actions, you've got this little time tracker that's going to start counting down. You've got to move it every turn. And if you ever run out of time, you lose the game. Well, you might think to yourself, like, why would I ever focus on anything but going into dungeons? If I'm never going to beat them back and have fewer enemies to deal with, what's my incentive? Well, your incentive is if you can kill one of them, then your time tracker moves back a couple of spaces, which is a very big deal. If you're not constantly killing someone, you're not going to have enough time to win the game. That may not do as much for you as it does for me. I thought that was a really clever kind of time track mechanism that I quite like.
I mean, I think that is a well use of it. I don't like feeling like I'm just slowly getting outnumbered or just having to manage. I guess I could just be better at this game. That's really probably the ultimate solution. Is me just being better at the game.
Just get good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that gives us you a pretty good overview of the game. You're going to be going through these dungeons, trying to buy yourself time by killing other people as you try ultimately to get these crystal shards to finish the game. So I feel like that gives you a pretty good overview. Let's talk at the end of this review here about the good, the bad, and the ugly for this game to help you decide if this is a good fit for a solo play for you. As far as the good things are concerned, Carter, what are the best things about this game for you?
I mean, I think, well, I really love the components. They're great and phenomenal, and it's fun to lay it all out and to play on the board. But I really just like the variety of characters and all of their abilities and just the different combinations of just figuring out, okay, I've maybe played with this character, but the way it teams up with, some of the different characters, is different strategy that you're going to use to like maximize. And I love that. I think it's the replayability from that alone is fantastic.
I totally echo both of those things. I think this is one of the coolest productions for a small box game that I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. Really, really awesome job with the components. And like you said, the variety, that's great. I love player powers. I don't know if we've talked about this. I love player powers very much. And I think this game has it in spades. All of the characters feel pretty different. They have cool designs. Like there's one of this on the front of the box. It's an elephant wearing armor. I'm a sucker for that. I love elephants. And so you got that, plus like your pretty standard fantasy stuff, plus the guy from the Gameland logo makes it into the game as well.
Oh, right, of course.
Which is just a little goofy. But I think all that stuff is fun and helps to really nail that feeling of the Final Fantasy Tactics thing that they're going for. So all that for me is really great. And I would put here in the good category, and I hesitate to say this, but I think, as somebody who's not played the multiplayer game, I think it would be a really fun multiplayer game.
Yeah, it seems like it would be, but I don't know.
Yeah, it just has rules-wise, and having played with the core mechanics, it feels like it would have that good kind of light, but with a little bit of crunch, kind of beer and pretzels game that I think a lot of people could enjoy. Would have pretty wide appeal for like gamer folks and people who just want to play with their families. So all that I think is really neat. Anything else that you would add to the good for this?
I think that's about it for good.
Yeah, I think it's going to be it for me too for good. There are quite a few bad things on the list.
Yeah, I mean, I would say bad, and this is with the solo in mind in particular, is it just didn't, what I'm doing in the solo game does not match my expectations for what I want this game to be. And I can never really get over that dissonance between like what I wanted and what I was actually doing. I wanted to have tactical battles, and like the way it worked out, I didn't really feel like I was doing as much tactical stuff. It was a weird kind of just like managing the enemy while I tried to rush around and do other things. I don't know. It just didn't feel great to me.
Yeah, I feel like you don't play the game in quite as tactical a manner when you know that the enemy's going to respawn immediately as soon as you kill it.
Yeah.
Like the tactical part is you not dying.
Right.
And that's not fun. I feel like having the risk on both sides is what makes the tactical battle thing a fun game.
Right.
So that part was a little sad to me. Also, just not enough tactical stuff to think through on your turn. And by that I mean, this could just be like an expectations thing. But one of my favorite things about Final Fantasy Tactics or any of those kind of games is positioning matters a great deal. Not just terrain, but like if I attack you from behind or from the side, you're going to take more damage than if I attack you from the front. And that simple like facing mechanic and doing more damage trying to get behind somebody adds a lot of depth to those kind of games. And none of that is here. Mm-mm. It doesn't matter if I'm hitting you from the side or the front. It's going to be the same amount of damage. It's just a matter of like the knockback thing, which is cool. But I just wanted it to have like a little more depth.
Yeah.
And that would have gone a long way for me in helping me to have a better time with this game.
Yeah.
Between that and the fact that I didn't feel like I accomplished very much on my turn made the game feel kind of long and grindy.
Right. I wish, and maybe this is just like we've been talking about expectations, you are penalized if you try to move and attack in the same turn. And I would rather just be able to do that every single time and maybe reduce some of the ranges that the rogue characters or the magic users have, instead of having a range of like 5 or 4, just like a range of like 2 or 3. And I feel like that would maybe make it a little bit easier to do, but I don't know. That's just how it came off to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think some tweaks in that area would have made this game quite a bit better for me. The other thing is just that the solo mode is not Tiny Epic Tactics. It's just a different game.
Yeah.
And the dungeon crawl thing, it doesn't do anything for me. I feel like I would really love to play Tiny Epic Tactics What I got was sort of a half-baked dungeon crawl idea. That doesn't work for me. That takes almost an hour to play, and that's non-starter for me. There are way too many games that are play amazingly well for solo in under an hour for me to bother with playing this one solo again. Mm-hmm. And the whole time I was playing it, I just kept thinking, man, I bet this would be so much fun with just like 2 other people.
Yeah.
It would be so good. So yeah, I just don't think it's a great fit for solo play in that regard. Now, anything that you would consider ugly for this game?
I think this is personal, but I really just hate the enemies spawning immediately. Like, there's not a delay. As soon as you kill one, a brand new one just pops down on the battlefield. And I really hated the way that felt.
Yeah, that is pretty punishing feeling. It just feels like you're not doing anything. You're not progressing in the game.
Even if it's completely fair in the balance of everything, I still just hate the way it feels.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I mean, I feel like that's probably everything that we need for this game. And as you could probably guess, this is not going to be a game that gets a stamp of approval from us. I think this is a game that I could love if I had a chance to play it with other people. But I'm not likely going to.
Right.
I bought this with the hope that I would get that feeling in the solo game. I mean, I was way more excited for this game than any other Tiny Epic game. Most Tiny Epic games, I think, just look cool and novel, but I probably wouldn't buy them. This, as soon as I saw it, I was like, I must have this game. I must try it because the terrain and everything looks so awesome. But yeah, otherwise, it's just not quite enough for me as a solo game to warrant it. Now, I should say here, a lot of that could be my expectations, right? They didn't promise me Final Fantasy Tactics in a box. They did not promise me the same kind of solo experience. If I had read more on the Kickstarter page, I would have been able to see this is a very different kind of solo mode. And so I think if my expectations had been in the right place, I probably would have had a better time with it, frankly. But I didn't. And so I thought it was a game that I wish I had more time to play with other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's all that we're going to say about Tiny Epic Tactics, and that's going to bring us to the end of the episode, folks. Just a couple of notes before we end, and this first one is a biggie. Next episode, we're going to have a guest reviewer with us on the show. I thought about telling you who it is, but, well, just come back and see. I think you're going to know him, and I think you're going to like him. So come back and check that out as we're going to do a cool review with someone else. So come back next episode for that. Also, if you haven't followed us on Facebook or Instagram yet, you should, because I post pictures of games that I'm playing and that sort of thing. Just recently posted some pictures of Feast for Odin, which I brought out for the first time in a while. It is still so good. So we've never reviewed that on the show, but y'all, you got to play this game. It's really good stuff, especially for solo play. So follow us on there, and you can find like kind of mini reviews for things that we wouldn't normally cover on the show, which is pretty cool. You can also, if you have not yet, go onto iTunes and rate or review the show. That's a good way to help other people find us, which is a really nice thing. Also, if you have not gotten the yellow and purple dinosaur that we have as a micro badge on Board Game Geek, you need to get one. It's really cool. It is what all the cool kids are doing these days. And if you don't have 8 Geek Gold, I will spot you that so that you can get one for yourself. Just send me a message, and I'm more than happy to send you that. I actually just got 2 more requests right before we reviewed this episode, so come and join the legions who are putting this dinosaur on their profile. And that's it for this episode, folks. Until next time, I'm Brandon Waite.
And I'm Carter Mackey.
And this is Solosaurus.